Thank you and welcome to the show for today. You are watching Perspectives, and I am host Alana McLaughlin. This morning on Perspectives, I am discussing mental crises and police procedural reform. And I have Elbony Weatherspoon here to discuss this topic with me. And we're talking about her background, her education, and ultimately her involvement with what we believe should be the reform of these police procedures, specifically in reference to mental crises in Tennessee. And so, Elbony, I just want to thank you for coming this morning.
Thank you so much.
You've come all the way from Murfreesboro. Through that traffic, that morning traffic.
Yes, it was a little hike here, but I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
And to just get this ball rolling,
Yes.
let's talk about baby Elbony years. Tell me just where you're from. Give me the introduction.
Originally, I am from West Tennessee, a little small country town called Savannah. I grew up there, and I also grew up in Jackson, Tennessee. So I moved here, actually in Nashville, probably about in my early 20s, and really came up here for work because in Jackson at that time it wasn't really a lot of jobs and things of that sort. So came up here, my family was here, my brother and his sister-in-law was already staying here and they enjoyed it. So we moved up, so the whole family is here. My sister, brother, my mom, my dad, everybody. So yes, ma'am.
And so now tell me, what did kind of the house look like as a child? Were y'all in church, extracurricular?
So I was into music a lot. I used to, growing up, I was singing a little bit and I started rapping and stuff like that. So I was into songwritings and things of that sort. And then life kind of happened when I got probably about in my early 20s. My cousin passed away, and it really was, I really got to that breaking point where I was like, okay, what am I doing with my life at this point? And so I started the regular job. I've been in customer service for 17 plus years. I recently was a lead access specialist for a hospital here in Nashville. So I absolutely love that job. Love to help people and always have had that mentality to get out there and change. So yes, ma'am.
And so kind of set up for me, life kind of after high school. This is a little before your transition to Nashville. Tell me who you were as a teenager, kind of discovering yourself those mental years.
Yeah, so I was really out there. At that time, there wasn't a YouTube or anything like that to get out there and really share your music and stuff like that. But I was in the studio and getting the CDs burnt and passing them out and stuff like that. Partying a little bit, just the regular.
The regular degular.
Yes, ma'am.
And now we're going to jump the gun a little bit, but we have so much ground to cover that it's all right. I want to talk about 2023, and I'm going to let you bring it in, but we're going to talk about that year. That was what, last year?
Yes, ma'am. 2023 was a year for me.
Okay. And I know August in specific.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So I will say that August 31st changed my life. But it was the days prior to that incident that really changed my mentality about criminal justice and police policy and procedure and things of that such. My findings in domestic violence, mental illness, and police policy and procedure in my situation it was a few gray areas that needed to be addressed. And so at that time, I was dating someone. I tell everyone he was perfect until he wasn't, and it's something. And this isn't to degrade or talk bad about anyone. He really is a good person, but unfortunately, he suffered from a mental illness, and that was my first time really dealing with someone that had a severe mental illness. And so, in my process, it was domestic violence related. And when I was, looking for help, calling around, because the first few days before the 31st, I did call around and try to get help because he was showing signs that he was having a manic episode.
And what are some of those kind of red flags that we could look for?
Yes, ma'am. So a few of the red flags would be delusional conversations, talking about the earth is flat, aliens are real, just the delusional type things. But other than that, he at that point of time, it was like a switch. And it was something I tell everyone, if you've never seen someone change in front of your face like that, you do not want to deal with that. And if you do have to, you want to make sure that you take the proper procedures and have those in place. So yes, ma'am.
And in our second segment, we're going to pick back up on the days leading up to August 31st and ultimately the event that shook an entire neighborhood,
Yes,
an
it
entire
did.
city.
It
Honestly,
really
it was
did.
on every single news outlet.
It really was.
Wow.
Yes, ma'am.
And we're going to talk about just the ways that you've changed a bad situation and made it positive.
Yes,
You've
ma'am.
taken on reform, you have protested, you have lobbied,
Yes,
and you are
ma'am.
now encouraging other young black women to do the same,
Yes,
to join you.
Yes.
And we're going to
Get
talk about
out
it
there.
all.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so
And
much.
You are awesome, and we're going to discuss just all the awesome things you do. And I encourage our viewers to tune into the second segment of Perspectives, where Elbony and I will be discussing mental crises in Tennessee and police procedure reform. Second segment of the show for today. For viewers just tuning in, I am host Alana McLaughlin. You are watching Perspectives. This morning on the show, I have Elbony Weatherspoon here discussing her background, education, her life, and ultimately we're discussing the topic mental crises in Tennessee and police procedure reform, specifically in reference to these mental crises. In our first segment, we began to detail the harrowing story of Elbony surviving domestic violence, and we talked about the days leading up to this incident. We talked about how mental illness really began to take a toll on her partner, and we talked about some of the red flags that one could stay aware of in terms of that mental illness. We talked about delusion. We talked about incoherent thoughts in speech, and now we're going to pick right back up on just those days before, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. So yes, ma'am. So days before the incident happened, I had reached out to a few different facilities to ask for help, really just to see if there was any resources for him because he was not from Tennessee. And so, but when I was calling, every facility basically said that they had to voluntarily come into the facility.
Wow.
And so after I made a few calls and as the day progressed, I spoke with him and I let him know I was just, like, hey, I do believe that we need to, let's see about going to talk to a doctor. Let's see what they say. You don't have to stay if it's okay, And he refused. And so as time went on, unfortunately, his symptoms got worse. And I ended up calling the police for assistance to escort him out from my home. Unfortunately, when he did leave, there was a missing firearm that I had at my home. And he did take that firearm. When he did take that, at that very moment, I did not see him take it because I was working. I worked from home. And so just imagine I'm working and I'm trying to deal with this and I'm really in the middle of the day and it's super busy. And so yeah, when I called the police, he had ended up leaving. He walked out. And as he was walking, the police had stopped him. One of the officers came to my home and he actually helped me look for the gun. The gun was not there. And I told him, I said, listen, the gun was here when he was here. It was gone when he left. And unfortunately, when they went to speak with him, they asked if they could search him, and he said no. And they pretty much left it at that. From that point on, his symptoms progressed. He did get a hotel probably about less than a mile from my home. And there was multiple police encounters, at least 8 police encounters within a 3-day time span where I called a few times, as well as others that called in reference to his mental health. And unfortunately, there's just not a plan in place when it comes down to people that actually, need help. They need that medical attention. And unfortunately, he didn't get that. And I unfortunately didn't get the help that I needed for those days prior. So the day of, on the 31st, unfortunately, he barricaded himself in my home. He refused to come out. While he was in my home, he was destroying all of my property. And of course, if everyone saw the news, it was a pretty big thing.
The entire neighborhood.
Yeah, they shut down the entire neighborhood. The school was shut down. I actually, at that time, I was in so much shock. I went into survival mode. Like, what do you do? What do you do? My kids were at school, but we got a call saying, hey, the buses isn't going to be coming through there, so you have to go get your kid. So I had to get somebody to go get my kid. They're wondering what's going on with mommy, what's going on. They knew mommy was dating because I was just dating. We were just dating. The regular get to know each other, go to the movies, things like that. And unfortunately, I just found myself in a situation where I literally had to put myself in danger to get the help that I needed.
Oh my God.
Yes,
And so
ma'am.
I'm still at a loss for words. On the 31st, did he end up surrendering, or?
Yes, he did. They ended up using tear gas and other methods to get him out of my home, and he finally surrendered. They actually ended up getting 2 different interpreters because at that time he was speaking in another language.
OMG.
It literally, I didn't know that that was that could be one of the symptoms as well.
Oh my
and
God.
so, yeah, he just, at that moment, I knew that he really needed medical attention. And, you know, just the fact that I believe that everyone was put in danger. It wasn't just me. He was put in danger because he was not mentally there. The police were put in danger because they really didn't understand or have a process in place to help him, me, or them. So yes,
Or the
ma'am.
kids.
Yes, exactly.
Because, oh my God.
And all the and my kids, they knew of him. They didn't know him. I try to keep that very private, but they knew mommy was dating. And so, but when I met him, I mean, so a little bit background about myself. I actually do credit repair. I'm a real estate agent. I've been doing credit repair for a long time, but I've always kind of did like, hey, credit checks and background checks, things of that nature. And he knew that. He was fine with it. When I did the background check, he did have things on his background, but it was dismissed. And in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, you know, I asked him about it. He's like, yeah, they couldn't, you know, prove this and that. And I was like, okay, that makes sense, you know.
Right.
But later on, I found out that really he was incompetent to stand trial, and so he was unable. They were unable to charge him with with those charges.
Oh my God.
Yes, ma'am. And so I didn't know that it was that serious until a family member of his reached out to me. She was someone that I got close to. I was doing her credit and everything. Like, we were really cool. And so she was telling me, like, hey, I just wanted to warn you about his, you know, diagnosis because he's showing signs that he's going through a manic episode. He was posting on social media at least 100+ stories a day, and it was constant, and it was just random, or about random things. So she kind of gave me a heads up, but by then I had already noticed. And so I had already been Googling and stuff like that, and I had already been looking for telephone numbers to call. So when she told me that, that's whenever things really started, like, okay, I do understand. He does have a serious mental, severe, you know, mental issue.
And in our final segment, we're going to talk about that response, both on the 31st and then in the days after. I'd like to examine both the police response to you as the victim and to him as the aggressor. And I want to talk about both the ways that procedures were done correctly and ways that they're lacking. And then that's going to tie into the involvement that you have with the Tennessee state legislature and what you're trying to do for the community in terms of this reform for these crises.
Yes, ma'am.
And in our final segment, I encourage our viewers to tune back into this amazing episode where Elbony and I will be discussing mental crises in Tennessee and police procedural reform. Welcome to the final segment of the show for today. For viewers just tuning in, I am host Alana McLaughlin, and you are watching Perspectives. This morning on the show, I have Elbony Weatherspoon joining me to discuss mental crises in Tennessee and police procedural reform. We're discussing Elbony's background, her personal experiences with domestic violence and mental crises here in Tennessee, and we're going to pick back up on what life looked like for both herself as the victim and for her aggressor after this mental crisis, and we're going to talk about ways that we'd like to see procedures for these crises reformed here in Tennessee. Elbony, just picking right back up, we've just detailed, oh my God.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh my God. And after that incident on August 31st, I want to talk about the resources that you as the victim had.
Yes.
Once all the tear gas is gone and once you clean up the house,
Yes.
what are some of the
oh my goodness, it was a pure mess. When I say, as soon as they said that they were going to have to bust down the door, I knew then. I said, okay, what do I do next? So when they use the tear gas, unfortunately, with tear gas, you can't stay in that area. You have to clean that up with a special way or whatnot. But I went on ahead, we packed up our things, my family came, and we got some of our items, and we ended up moving because unfortunately I wasn't able to stay. So we ended up, relocating to a family member's home. And we went from being 5 minutes down the street from school to 20 minutes, and I did not want to change their school because they're comfortable there, right? And so, yeah, that changed. And then just the living dynamic, it went from, having a 3-bedroom, 2-bath to a 3-bedroom, 1-bath. And it's just a lot of changes for myself and for my family. And so, it took me a while to really get out and really talk about it for a couple months. So I was really distraught. I had to go through therapy and talk to my doctor and things of that sort. I was not able to go back to work because of severe PTSD, severe depression and anxiety. But I want to say that, through it all, it did open my eyes to a whole new world of the justice system that is truly unfair. I do believe that we should have some better responses when it comes down to domestic violence and mental illness and police policy and procedure when it comes down to guns, if a gun is involved, after doing research, it really changed my life to the point where I was doing research and I'm figuring out these ways. How can we fix this? Because this should never happen again. I literally was by myself and felt as though I had no other choice but to do what I did in order to get help. And so, since then, I've been getting with different organizations. Shout out to Bridges to Freedom. And also Miss Clemmy Greenlee and Kia, everyone that I've been, communicating with and getting down there, Miss Rafia. We've all been down there going to legislation offices, talking to these senators and people like that to really try to let them know about these bills that are coming out and also to let them know about my story in ways that could change some things. So yes, ma'am.
And I want to examine it from the way of the next steps for him. I'm not sure if you're totally aware, but I'd like to know. I'm curious.
So with him, he's still in jail at this moment. He did have to go through a mental evaluation. Pretty much he was incompetent to stand trial on the charges that he faced on the day of the 31st. So he will not be charged for anything that he did to me or to anyone else on that day or prior. So that was a really big eye-opener, and I feel as though, when it comes down to the police policy and procedures, and this is just my personal opinion from where I come from, allowing a police officer to use their discretion on someone's mental health is not something that should be happening. I do believe that a medical professional should have been called within those 3 days. It should have been somebody that stepped in to make sure that he had the medical attention that he needed, so that no one would be in the situation that we ended up being at the end. But he did go through a mental evaluation. I do believe that there's other things that happen afterwards that he may be looking towards, but unfortunately, when it comes down to me and the charges that he faced on the day that changed my life, he won't be charged with any of that. So
and that just doesn't make sense.
It does not make sense.
I understand what they mean about, that mental competence, and I do believe that, everyone deserves a fair trial, a fair and just that they can understand.
Exactly.
But I feel as though this is almost being swept under the rug.
Exactly. And then another thing that I found out is that there are repeat offenders that are supposed to be on medication that do not take their medication for various reasons. And I do believe that if a doctor say that you need to take a medication in order for you to be, a sane individual, then that should be something that is looked into more often than how it is now. I do understand that at the end of the day, we all have free will, but if you put yourself in a situation where you know for sure that if I don't do this, then something's going to happen, then I do believe that it has to be a better procedure in place, especially if they're going to allow people to do things and, they're not going to have the medical attention that they need. And then afterwards, that's it. Once he gets out, that's
And you know, Elbony, I think about it right now. That he's sitting in prison. What good does that do? Yes,
Exactly.
he deserves to feel the consequences of his action, but he needs mental
Exactly.
help.
He needs mental help.
He needs not to be around other prisoners who
Exactly.
don't deserve to be subjected to that.
Exactly.
And with how, you know, crowded and overrun state prisons naturally are,
Yes,
who's to
ma'am.
say that he's even getting that medication every day?
Exactly. And I actually requested, because again, I don't think that he's a bad person at all. I do believe that he was placed in a position that unfortunately it ended the way that it did. I did ask the defense attorney to see about him getting mental help other than going to a prison. So if he has any, you know, time that he'll have to serve for anything, I'm hoping that it'll be, you know, in a mental facility.
And I think that our mental facilities that we have here in town should work in close conjunction with Metro Nashville Police and with surrounding Rutherford County, all these different counties, because intake should not just have to be voluntary.
Exactly.
It doesn't take a genius to recognize a mental crisis. If I'm watching you hurt yourself or threaten to hurt me, I should be able to call Vanderbilt and say this person is experiencing a crisis and we need help. Now, I know different organizations like NAMI do actually, you know, take people in, but still, that's not everyone.
Yes, and I've actually, after everything, I have really got out there and got with a lot of different organizations. I've teamed up with NAMI, I've teamed up with the Domestic Violence Center, I've teamed up with so many organizations that have the same goals at hand. And I'm really looking to create some change within the police policy and procedure, hopefully through NAMI, because I do believe that they have an education class that they actually go, you know, to the police officers and teach. So I'm hoping to get involved and at least be able to share my story to say, hey, this was a situation that should never happen again. What are ways that we could fix this in order to make sure that it never happens again?
You are also a beacon of hope and resilience.
Yes,
because
thank you
seriously,
so much.
I told you we were friends on Facebook when everything went down. I didn't even know. And you, meeting you in real life this morning, I never ever would have thought that you had been through something like that. You have the best energy. You have an amazing smile. We've been hugging and grabbing hands all morning, and that's inspiring because I'm sure that someone watching this morning at home is dealing with someone similar. There's someone in the next bedroom that's dealing with.
And I've actually spoke with people, even in the Cordell Hall building, when talking to legislators and different people. When I go to tell my story, they're like, you know what? I actually have a family member that deals with, you know, severe mental illness, and it has really, you know, did this and did that. And I didn't know that it was that bad, but it is. And I think it's something that really needs to have the attention that it deserves in order for us to be able to come up with a plan for everyone, because no one deserves to go through that alone.
And I thank you for what you're doing on the ground, and thank
much.
you for sharing this powerful story.
Thank you so much.
I'm like fighting back tears, so I'm like, my
Thank
God.
you so much. It took me a long time to not cry whenever I bring it up, so thank you so much.
And thank you for that strength.
Yes.
I was praying that this episode wouldn't be triggering or too much, but we've made it through, and so thank you. God bless you, Elbony.
Thank you.
And to my viewers, thank you for allowing us this space to share these stories, to share the stories that impact our community. To my viewers, thank you, and I wish you a good morning.